First news topic of the week. Well, what can we say? There was indeed the widely predicted state of play. It came to pass. 40 minutes, well, 39 and a bit, packed with material. And I guess the big story, well, there are several big stories, of which we'll be covering several of them here. Ghost of Yōtei, the new game from Sucker Punch. It has been revealed. It's coming in 2025. New protagonist, new technology. But very much, I would say, what could I say? An evolution of what has come before. I'm going to go to you first, Oliver, for this, for your opinions on it. Interesting presentation, right?
Yeah, overall, I mean, I thought it looked great. Tons of foliage, tons of scale. Exactly what we saw from the first Ghost title, but rendered very, very impressively here. There's also that huge mountain, and I kind of wonder if they'll let you climb it or how they'll manage that in terms of structure. Because the first Ghost game had a very conventional open world structure where they kind of let you unlock different parts of the map as you went on, and I imagine they could do some more creative things with that mountain in the presumably in the center of everything. In terms of that vast open world, that great sense of scale, inviting the player to explore, lots of distant fog, volumetric clouds, very effective representation of the world. I think that's where this game really excels. Plus all that great foliage animation, like we see at about 2:23 in this trailer, where you get lots of those leaves floating around, and then also the GPU particles that we see whenever you see fire and smoke and all that stuff coming around. It really reminds me of that first game there. But I also found it a little bit curious because it's maybe not showing a lot in particular that I would identify with the PS5 in terms of rendering. I was just looking around and just trying to spot different things. I don't think there's RT reflections. If you look at 221, it looks like they have a fairly low-res cube map there. In the shot at 3 minutes, the main character doesn't reflect in a puddle at all, which I thought was weird. You'd normally expect some kind of screen space reflection there or other reflection technique. And then in close-ups, you can see they're pretty clearly using shadow maps, so they look fine. I'm not objecting to any of this stuff. But there's one thing that did give me a little bit of pause, which is there's a scene at about 2 minutes in a little wooden kind of pub area, that kind of thing, where the light is spilling in and you can kind of see the light bouncing around that little enclosed space, especially towards the left-hand side of the frame a little bit. But I think that's kind of something that I looked at and I was kind of is this RT? Is it not RT? Could it be? But it didn't look super detailed to me or per pixel or anything like that. So it's kind of debatable on that front. But I don't know. It also looked a little bit weird in that scene because you see those little light sources in the candles, and then they're casting shadows onto the floor. But then there's this really, really bright light source coming from the outside, and that should pretty much overwhelm those candles. You shouldn't, to me at least, that just looked a little bit bizarre. But again, these are minor things I'm trying to pick through this trailer. One of the problems with this trailer, I think, in terms of doing an analysis, is that it's so broad in terms of scale that a lot of that, I think, graphical detail that does stand out in games like this is when you actually start to look at smaller elements in smaller, more enclosed environments, then you can pick out some things a little bit more easily. But I thought it was a compelling trailer on its own terms. I'm just kind of excited to see a little bit more from the game.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what did you think?
I mean, I was actually kind of visually disappointed with this trailer. I don't think it was... it's a good-looking game in the aspects of they have art direction. That's pretty much nothing I would ever fight about on the channel. But I do think it looked like an extreme amount of continuity with the previous title for visual rendering aspects, the scene in the bar you were talking about earlier, though. If you just look at the the bright white light reflecting off the floor to the right hand side of the screen, it is not aligned with the window at all. It just looks like they put either a light probe there, or there is a point light or something like that. To me, it just actually looks a lot like the technology we saw in the first game for how indirectly lit things are. That's not a hard thing to do in a game. Just put a light, at the opening of a place. In fact, almost every game using baked lighting does that too, usually, because then they get fake shadows from them. They'll put a light at a windowsill, even though, usually you would see skylight pouring through there, but they just put fake lights there. All the other stuff that Oliver talked about too. The only thing that I noticed that was maybe a bit of a step up from the first game is after the main character meets the wolf that is presumably their companion. They look out across the countryside and you can see some really far distant grass level of detail there, some LODs far out into the distance, further than you would see, for example, I would say in the first game. That game actually did cull that to a distance closer to the camera. And that was something interesting to see, maybe a bit further grass distance there. Something to get like a far, it wouldn't mean like it's the same type of grass, but something to cover the far LOD that wasn't really covered in the first game, and you'd always kind of see it like loading in front of you. So I think that is different, but the rest of it to me looked a lot the same as the last game. And one thing that was a little bit confusing about the trailer was it was presented all at 30 FPS, which I think maybe didn't do it favors as well too. It's pretty compressed over the stream. I was like trying at a number of points to look at the texture detail. Because the first game kind of has just like okay texture detail. It's not like super high. I was trying to look for it, but it was just all lost in the stream. So that stuff doesn't do it favors, unfortunately. But to me, I mean, I'm interested to see if there is something more that is not present in this trailer. But this trailer actually just looked a lot like the first game to me.
Yeah, I missed that light in there. That totally, that does kind of reveal a little bit, showed up. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I think it looks appealing on its own terms, but you are totally right that there's not a whole lot here that I'm looking at that's like, could this be that much of a step change from the original outside of like pushing out LODs and doing more detailed stuff and just kind of like stepping things up in a more gradual way? It doesn't really seem like there's a whole lot here that's like really pushing out the boat in the way that we might get from other Sony first-party studios here, but I don't know. It's kind of strange.
We got this supporter question from Mitten-Faced Lass. Any idea what's up with the image quality in the Ghosts of Yōtei revealed trailer? It seems really mediocre / actively bad. Just bad capturing / encoding PSSR artifacts. What's up? It was egregiously noticeable and distracting to me at least. Was a bit confusing to see it revealed looking that way. That's interesting. I mean, it kind of presented similarly to what we've seen before. I think I'm not sure there was that much that was different or worse as such. Any thoughts, Alex?
I mean, I actually just think a lot of the encoding was a big part of the issue here, if that is what it's talking about. I didn't see like extra special like flickering or aliasing in the trailer that I wouldn't expect, for example. But I think, this game uses really like punchy, high contrast kind of post-processing to drive, like its lighting systems are very standard open world kind of things, but then it like drives it with like a really punchy, like blacks are very, very dark. And, you see a lot of that high contrast mainly through post-processing. And I think maybe that doesn't fare too well over a compressed video format. Things are going to macro block really hard, I think, in that aspect. So I don't know. I think maybe it's just the encoding, actually. I don't think it looked particularly aliased.
Yeah. Also, it wouldn't be PSSR, I don't think, because this is all captured on PS5. Indeed, I'm not sure there was any PS5 Pro capture during the State of Play outside of that one section where Mark appeared to show off everything. Everything was kind of like marked as PS5 content. So, I mean, I don't think this is anything extraordinary, but I would say that at least on PS5 Pro, if not on base PS5, I would hope for a 60 FPS mode, because like I think that kind of has to come as standard when you're dealing with a game like this. I really do think they should have a 60 FPS mode in there, but we're gonna have to see in that one, I guess, as well, because this is all at 30.
I'd say it was likely to have a 60 FPS mode based on the first one and based on the precedent set by basically all the PlayStation 5 first-party titles, you'd think.
Yes.
And I get your point, actually. And again, it's a fair point that at the beginning of the State of Play, they always disclose exactly what the content is you're going to be seeing, unless there's a variation from it. And it just said you're going to be seeing stuff from PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 development kit. Which kind of makes sense. And it was pretty much all PlayStation 5 throughout, except for Power World.
Yeah, there was also
weirdly
that one. Yeah, that was like, this is not gameplay. I think it says at the bottom. There was also another game that looked very UE5 like that surprised me with its performance. It was like open world. I forget the name of it. Is it No, it is not that one. I'm looking at all the names of the games here in a list. Yeah, I forget the name of it off the top of my head. I'll tip Oliver about this afterwards. But there was a game that they showed that was an open world, very UE5 looking game in terms of the indirect lighting and just all the post processing. And it was running like ridiculously well to the point where I'm like, I haven't seen many open world UE5 games running like that before. So that one surprised me. Another thing that they showed off where I was a little surprised that they showed off this mode in it was the Dragon Age Veilguard demo they showed off with a large introductory cinematic sequence. I do really think this game's looking pretty great actually at this point. I'm a little bit here or there on the art style sometimes, but I do think the rendering is really well done. And they showed off the game in a 30 FPS mode when it got to combat. I imagine this is going to be one of those games that like limits cinematics to 30. But they showed off the 30 FPS mode that the game has when they get to combat. And it did pretty noticeably, I think, have ray traced reflections on the body of water. The usual obscurance issues that we see with SSR and Frostbite titles wasn't there. Like when the dragon thing is moving around, like its legs are obscuring like different parts of the back part of its body with the flames. And you don't see the issues there, which was really interesting. But like at that same point, like the stream was so blocky that I was having trouble like inspecting any of the graphics in like a usual way. It was like, because it's like dark and a lot of purple and blacks and blues mixed with this like bright red fire. So all the stuff that was darker was really just like mush looking usually, which is a shame because I think the game's probably really detailed, being a Frostbite game, but you can't really see it through the stream. But I did get one really like sharp edge, like when the tail of the thing was spinning around, and it did count to like a little bit above 1080p, maybe 1080p internal. I'd presume, I think they've announced that they're using like a special version of FSR2 for the consoles on their blog. So looks like maybe 4K FSR2, 30 FPS, 1080p-ish internal with RT. That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah. I think they've discussed in the PlayStation blog from this week, they said that they're doing RTAO for that 30 FPS mode. I don't know if they talked specifically about RT reflections, but it could be in there. And then they're doing a 60 FPS mode, at least on the base PS5, with no RTAO. That was kind of what they earmarked there. But yeah, so they're doing a couple different modes there. And RTAO is the one they mentioned, but could be RT reflections as well.
Nice. I thought the game just looked fantastic generally. I've seen it before on PC, and if that was PlayStation 5 code, I think we're in for a bit of a treat there.